Hey, First Assembly, this is Pastor Wes. It's so good to be with you this evening. Grab your Bible and let's sit down and let's get into the Word of God. Hey, it's so good to be with you this evening, and I want to thank you guys for joining. And if you were joining on Facebook, if you would take a second and hit the like button, that would help us. If you're watching on YouTube this evening, if you would hit the subscribe button, that would really be a blessing to us. And please make sure you comment and let us know you're there. If you've got a prayer request, we want to hear about it so we can agree with you in prayer. I still believe God does miracles. And if you have a testimony that you want to share, please let us know, because we want to celebrate with you what God is doing. We took some time a couple weeks ago. We've started this series called Dealing with the Heart, because everything flows out of our heart. And our core verse, our foundational verse, is Proverbs 4:23. It says this: above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. That's in the NIV. And I love the New Living Translation. It says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. And so we've been looking at this question, simply this: how is your heart? Our hearts are what navigate our lives. And so we've been wrestling with this reality of what are things that have been affecting your heart. And there are several core things that we've been dealing with, several core things that I think can get stuck in our spirits or stuck in our hearts that affect the way that we live, that affect the decisions that we make in our lives, and they affect the way that we love ourselves as well as loving our neighbor as ourselves. And I've taken a couple of weeks and we've addressed 4 of them, or going to be addressing 4 of them. But maybe in this season, while you've been walking with me in this, there have been some other things that have kind of risen to the surface of your life that weren't included in the 4 that I'm talking about, but maybe the Holy Spirit has led you to that. And I really want to encourage you that if the Holy Spirit is stirring something in you, to take some time and pray down on that and dig down on that and see where the Holy Spirit will lead you. Because I believe this: all of us have things that can be stuck in our hearts, and what happens in our hearts affects everything that we do. And so it's the time to deal. It's the time to dig. It's the time to embrace those things so that we can find freedom. The 4 things that we're going to be looking at, and we did 2 of these last week, which were guilt and anger. And tonight we're going to be looking at greed and jealousy. And when these things get stuck in your hearts, it begins to affect the way that you live, and they create in us this debt-debtor relationship. And I know I mentioned that a lot, but I cannot help but think that is such a big deal. I really think this debt-debtor relationship thing impacts marriages, it impacts friendships, it impacts working relationships, it impacts our lives far greater than I think we give it credit for. This whole debt-debtor thing is a big deal because it brings an imbalance into our lives and into the relationship. And because we were created for fellowship, created for relationship, when you have a debt-debtor thing going on, it impacts us in a great way. Now, last week we took a peek at the first 2, and we looked at guilt, which we described as a noun that acts like a verb. And what guilt says is, I owe you. I owe you. I've said something that was wrong, and I owe you an apology. I did something that was wrong, and I owe you. I carry this sense of debt in my life and this feeling of guilt. And what guilt says ultimately is I've taken from you, I've stolen from you, and therefore I owe you something. And so maybe you felt that you owed someone an apology, or maybe you felt that someone owed you an apology. There's a sensing of guilt there that's going on. And even if the only currency that you have to pay with is words, we feel obligated to pay something or to do something for that. We're trying to pay a debt. We're trying to make up for something. And sometimes, you and I both know this, sometimes things that we want to make up for can't be made up for. You can't unsay words. You can't undo some things. And sometimes things can be corrected, and sometimes things can't be. So guilt says, I owe you. The second one we looked at was anger. Anger says, you owe me. We tend to get angry when we don't get what we want. And sometimes what we think we deserve is wrapped up in what we want. And when that doesn't happen, we can get angry because we feel like something is owed to us. This should have happened for me. This should have gone differently for me. I deserve this. I've earned this. And there we go again into this debt-debtor relationship that affects everything that we do. And too often we feel when someone has done something to us and the anger rises up and we feel they owe us, is we want to pay them back. We want them to feel what we felt. We want them to have to deal with what we had to deal with. And again, sometimes, guys, some things you can't go back on. You can't go back to. What was said was said. And you can move forward in a healthy way, but we can't always go back and change what was done. And it's a very painful thing for people who live their life waiting for a debt to be paid that can't be paid back. You are stuck. You are hung in a place emotionally until we make peace with that thing. Anger is a sickness, and sick people act sick. Hurt people do hurtful things. It's the way that works. And even tonight, you may say, again, Pastor, I'm not an angry person, and that's good. I don't know many people who think they're angry people. But you know what? The best way to find out is not to look in the mirror and say, am I an angry person, but to look at your spouse, to look at your children, to look at your best friend. To look at the people that are the closest to you and ask them, give them an environment and a freedom to be honest, and ask them, am I an angry person? Do I live my life with anger just below the surface, ready to be expressed? And if they hesitate to answer, that's probably your answer. If you've ever been around a person that's an angry person, whether they realized it or not, you've learned that there are certain topics you stay away from. You've learned how to read their mood. When they come in or when they're in the room, and to know when it's okay to talk and when it's okay to engage and when you just kind of need to give them their space and leave them alone and stay away from them. Angry people don't always realize they're angry people, but that doesn't mean that they aren't. And maybe that stings. Maybe that's hard. Maybe it's tough listening to me tonight, and because God's bringing someone to your mind that you have avoided and that you have learned how to stay away from topics. Or maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone like you who kind of realizes, I've carried anger in my heart, and whatever is carried in our heart finds a way to be expressed. And I may have taken it out on people that I love and people that I'm close to. And maybe God's revealing that. And while it's painful sometimes to acknowledge that, it's painful sometimes to say, wow, I may be broken. I may be angry. I may be guilty. The joy of that is this: things that are brought to light can be addressed. And this may be the season for you to find healing. This might be the season for you to find breakthrough. And I am a big believer that while you may have a right to be angry, you may have a right to feel angry. Maybe there were things that were done to you and said to you and things that you've experienced that weren't right and they weren't fair and they weren't good and you're angry about them and legit. We can understand. But my question is always this: do I want to live angry? And I don't. I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to be a victim to anything or anyone. And so I think when we allow those things to control us, we live in a cycle. But when we're able to say, you know what, God can change my heart, and God can help me deal, and God can help me heal, and God can help me do this, all of a sudden your story becomes a testimony. And what has been an excuse for the way you act and the way that you speak and the way that you live and the decisions that you make, all of a sudden becomes a testimony of what God has done and how God has set you free. And so let your story be a testimony tonight. Guilt says, I owe you. Anger says, you owe me. And the first one tonight is greed. And what greed says is, I owe me. Greedy people feel like they deserve every good thing that has ever come their way, and probably several things that haven't come their way. What is mine is mine. It's not yours. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. And they hold things very close. And it's amazing because I think when they see it as theirs and they take such ownership of it, it's very hard for a person who has greed in their heart to give and to have a spirit of generosity. And that's weird. We're going into the holidays, we're going into the giving season, and I would just ask this: listen, are you someone who has a giving spirit? Are you having a spirit of generosity in your life? And if it's not something that comes easy to you, if it's not something that you say, man, I love to give, I want to give wisely and I want to give well, so I'm not going to give emotionally, but I'll pray about and have a decision on what I'm going to give and how I'm going to give so that I don't have buyer's remorse. If if you wrestle with that kind of thing, there may be an element of greed that is in your heart. Greedy people always have a story to explain why they are the way that they are. And a lot of times the story is this: hey, I grew up with nothing. I grew up, we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and I wore hand-me-downs, and life was tough, and things were hard, and challenging experiences. And I certainly am not making light of anyone's pain or anyone's struggle, but I think people who have come from a place of no or little financial security, and you just didn't have anything was your own, and now all of a sudden you're at a place in life that you can obtain some things and have some things, and what we do is we tend to hold those things so tightly that it becomes something in our hearts. And greed is a little different than guilt or anger in the dynamic of this, that it disguises itself so well in our lives. And what it does is this: it makes it very easy for us to say, when I talk about greedy people, I don't know anyone that would define themselves as a greedy person. And we could all say, man, I'm really glad that it's not me. But how would you know it if you saw it? I don't think I've ever met a person that said, hi, my name is Wes Johnson. I'm a greedy person. We don't talk like that, but we do say things like this: I'm just very careful with my stuff. I'm very careful with what I have. It's mine, and I worked hard for it, and I don't like people messing with it, so stay away from it. Unlike guilt or anger, greed hides behind layers of things. Greedy people tend to worry a lot about money. Because of the greed. The greedy people are reluctant to share. I'm just going to read a few of them I wrote down. Greedy people may give, but they are not cheerful about it. They do it out of debt. They do it out of that debt-debtor thing. I mean, everyone else is going to give. I really ought to do it. I feel bad about it, so I'm going to do it, but I didn't wish I have. I wish I didn't have to. They don't express gratitude often. If you are someone that doesn't express thankfulness, hey, you may need to listen to this section of our message. Greedy people are rarely ever content with what they have. It doesn't matter what level they're at. There always is something they think they need and something that they think they deserve. And the thing to understand about greed is that it's not a financial issue. I know we run there immediately. We always go, greedy people always want more money. It is not a financial issue. It is an issue of the heart. Because if you have someone who has a greedy spirit and they get financial gain, it doesn't make them less greedy. Greed is a spirit, and it resides in our heart. So I want to ask you, is it hard for you to give? Is it easy for you to come up with reasons not to give? We're going into our Christmas season, and there's a couple of things we're doing as a church. One is our Christmas outreach. For kids who, very needy families and folks who will not have anything. And we as a church have kind of committed to step up and helping them and blessing them and giving to help give some gift cards so these kids can have, a great Christmas. We have the Christmas shelter coming up where our missions department is going to be going to a shelter and ministering to adults and blessing some children. And we can give to that and be a part of that. And if you would like to, man, we'd love to have you give and be a part of that. Just if you give in person, right on the envelope, Christmas outreach, in the memo. If you're going to give online, put that in the memo, and we'll make sure those funds get there. But it's very easy to say that, but all of a sudden it's like, you know what? I've got family, I've got friends, I got people I got to buy for, I got kids of my own. So why do that when I got stuff of my own self I got to take care of? Well, there are reasons why, and I think if that's our first response, I think we might need to look inside of our hearts, Have your family or friends ever felt like they're competing with you and your stuff? Like you value your things more than them. When you give or when you do something for someone, there are strings attached to it. I mean, all these things are little symptoms, little signs that there may be a spirit of greed hidden behind the shadows or hidden in the shadows of our lives. Luke 12:15 says this: Then he said, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. And so here we're told to guard against every type of greed. Proverbs tells us to guard our hearts because out of it flows the wellspring of life. Our lives, our hearts navigate our lives. And of all the enemies of the heart, greed is one that I think is the most subtle, because what greed tells you is that stuff equals life. And hiding behind the greed ultimately, if you're going to dig down on this, and I'll give it to you, but hiding behind a spirit of greed ultimately is a spirit of fear, because fear fuels greed. It does, and it's driven by the what ifs. Hey, listen, I can't give, I can't serve, I have to get and hold and obtain, this is mine, and it's all mine. And it's driven by that fear of what if something gets lost? What if it's not enough? What if I don't get my fair share? What if I don't get what I deserve? If I'm not looking out for me, nobody's going to look out for me. And people who are dealing with greed have this little place in their heart that ultimately, behind the fear and behind everything, is this fear of this, that God won't or can't take care of them. That there's this gap between what they think God will do and what they want. And in that gap is the source of so much of the stress and anxiety in our lives that we carry. See, when it comes to greed, there's just never enough. And there's never going to be enough, because there's always going to be a what if. There's always something else that you really think you need and you really think you deserve. Something else that you need, you don't have quite enough, and it feeds the fear of not having enough. I read an article once where they took people who made $30,000 a year and said, listen, how much would you need to make to feel comfortable and to be content? And everyone who made $30,000 said, if I made $50,000, I would be set. I could function. It would be awesome. Then they asked people who made $50,000 a year, how much would you need to make to feel content and to be comfortable and be able to function in your life well? And they said, you know what, if we made $75,000, I think we could function and we would just be set. It would be fantastic. Then they asked people who made $75,000 a year, well, how much would you need? And they said $100,000. If we made $100,000, we would be set. You see, no matter where you are, there's always something more we want. There's always something more we need. Now, I'm not against blessing. I'm not against, working hard and obtaining things, but I think all things we need to wear is a loose garment. All things that come to us, all good things, come to us from God, by God, and they're God's. We're just in stewardship of them. Listen, we can allow a spirit of greed to lead us to decisions that will erode the things that you value. And sometimes you feel like you're gaining by obtaining, and what you're really doing is losing. It's amazing, because greed, what you value affects how you value. I want to say that again. What you value affects how you value. All right. Guilt says I owe you. Anger says you owe me. Greed says I owe me. And jealousy is the last one. And I'm going to need you to stick with me on this. Jealousy says God owes me. Now, when you think of jealousy, you may not immediately think God owes you something. Jealousy, we tend to think of having or wanting or desiring things that we don't have that others do have, and it can look like a certain set of skills, or wait, why are they thin and I'm not? Why are they wealthy and I'm not? Why are they athletic and I'm not? There's something someone has that you look at and you feel like you deserve that, and it could be an endless list. It could be anything. And sometimes when we express jealousy towards the person, that's the surface level of it. But when you dig down in it, when you dig down on it, the root of it is this: there's an imbalance. There's something that's unfair. They have something that I don't. And the foundation of it is this: if I really believe that God can do anything, God could have fixed this. What God did for them, God could have done for you, but He didn't. And so jealousy says, God, you owe me. God, you've got to make this wrong right. Why did they meet the person? And why do they have the relationship that I've always wanted? Why did they get the car or the house or the job that they did and I didn't? You're not angry that they got theirs. You're just mad that you didn't get yours. I don't want my neighbor's car, but I do want one just like it. And it's not fair. I don't know why my sister can fit in size 3, but I can't. I'm not mad that she can. I'm just jealous that I'm not able to. Why does it feel like God skipped me? And we unconsciously can feel like, God, you have to fix this. And God is taking care of other people better than he's taking care of me. And if only this were different or that were different, well then God, I would be okay, but it's not. So God, you let me down. And that's that foundation. When you start chasing jealousy down the root, ultimately as believers, we believe God controls everything. And so we believe that God should have fixed it and God could have fixed it, but he chose not to. And when you start peeling these things away from the issue, it's really not with the person who has what you want. It's with God, and you feel like he owes you something. When we think in terms of jealousy, we think in terms of friendships or coworkers or neighbors. It doesn't really register with us as a grudge or an issue, an anger against God. But ultimately, when you start peeling the onion, ultimately it gets down to that, because God could have fixed it, but he didn't. And the truth is that the people that we're jealous of can do nothing to remedy the situation. When your neighbor has a nicer car than you, what do you want him to do? He can't fix the problem for you. And so who has the power to make right the issue that you have with the people who have what you want? For me to tell you that you have an issue with God, for me to say, if you have that jealous spirit, even though it's subtle and it disguises itself well, but ultimately to tell you that jealousy is an issue with God, not an issue with a person, might feel absurd and might sound absurd, because you said, Pastor Wes, as a follower of Christ, I owe God everything, but maybe that's why this can fly below the radar for us in a lot of our lives, and in many ways in our lives, because the focus is on the skinnier sibling or the neighbor with a nice car, and it's not getting to the real root of the issue. Someone buys a new house and you're like, wow, this is a beautiful house, but you know what? Why them, God? Why not me? That's the spirit I'm talking about. And it happens more subtly than we realize. And I think one of the ways of saying, hey, maybe I have a jealous spirit is by saying this. Our jealousy feels better when the people who have what we want suffer a setback. That's a sign, I think, that maybe there's some jealousy or a spirit of jealousy in our hearts. And when you have a spirit of jealousy, I'm telling you, it will affect your relationships. It will affect your decision making. It will affect the way that you live and the way that you love other people. And none of us like to admit that, your neighbor's car that you look at and you celebrate with him because you're happy for him that he has this amazing car, but you're a little upset that you don't. Why did God bless them and not bless me? Well, all of a sudden your neighbor pulls in his driveway and you look, and he was at the mall and someone backed into his fender, and now his brand new awesome car has a dent in it, and you go, oh man, that's terrible, that's a shame. But you feel a little better because that happened. When the people that look like they're the perfect couple, and he loves her and she loves him, and they're respectful and they're honoring, and they love God and they love each other. And you've all seen those couples. They're so awesome. It almost makes you sick. And all of a sudden you see them fighting one day and you go, oh man, I hope they work it out. But there's a part of you like, trouble in paradise. There's a spirit of jealousy behind that. When someone who seems like they've always had enough struggles a little bit, and that little part of you says, good, now welcome to the way the rest of us live. There's a spirit of jealousy there. And the spirit of jealousy hides so well in our hearts that we can just justify it away. Because before you know it, with no effort of our own, that feeling of satisfaction comes when there's struggle. And that's a sign that there's something wrong in us. And you say, Pastor, it's that feeling of satisfaction. Where did that come from? Well, it came from your heart. And your heart affects everything that you do. Your heart navigates your life, and what is in your heart is going to find a way to be expressed, and it will affect the choices that you make, and it will affect the decisions that you make, and it affects the way that you love. And the people or things that we're jealous of, they're not the real problem, because the truth is, if it wasn't them, it would just be something else. It would just be someone else. We would continue, when you carry it in your heart, you'll continue to find a way to express that spirit. And if it's not them, it's going to be something or someone else. And so there's always someone who's going to have more than than you. There's always someone who's going to be more talented than you. There's always someone who's going to have more money than you. There's always someone who's going to have a nicer car or a bigger house than you. And that's why it's so important that we deal with these things. It's so important that even in a season of giving and everything that's going on, we've got to dig down and say, how is my heart? As these things come to surface, it might be painful because none of us ever want to see ourselves as broken or wrong. But as these things come to surface, when you begin to ask yourself, why do I do what I do? And why do I feel what I feel? By addressing these things, it brings a freedom to your heart and to your life. And so I want to ask you today, if you've wrestled with greed, if you've wrestled with jealousy, if you wrestle with listen, are you upset with God? Is that the real thing? When you start peeling away, it's not about the neighbor having a nicer car or someone fitting into smaller clothes than you. It's not about those things. It's deeper than that. And we've got to get to the heart of the issue. Do you have an issue with God in your heart? Does it express itself through guilt or anger or greed or jealousy? See, you and I both know that seeing the issue is different than fixing it. And so what do? Well, we can either ignore it, we can just justify it away and keep going, or we can say, you know what? I want my heart to be healthy and I want to love the way God calls me to love and see people and things the way God calls me to see people and things. And so do I find and look for a solution and a cure to this? We can fall back on justification and our reasons for being the way that we are, or we could say simply, I'm ready to be free. And I'm ready to be different. At this place and stage and season of my life, God, let your Holy Spirit search me and change me and know me, oh God. And let me be everything that you say that I am. So who do I owe? And who do I think owes me? And am I ready? Am I willing to pay what I need to pay and receive what I need to receive and cancel some debts that can't be repaid so that I can have a healthy heart? Listen, next Wednesday, we're going to take the journey and talk about true change. True change, not just talking spiritual thing, but true change in our lives. How do I make that change from carrying anger, from carrying guilt, from carrying greed or jealousy, and allow God to change my heart? And I want to encourage you to come back and join us next Wednesday at 7 o'clock as we dig down into this. Folks, it is Wednesday night. Thanksgiving is tomorrow. I pray blessing on you. All of us have so many things that we can be thankful for. And I really hope you take this moment in this season to step back and truly be thankful for all that God has done, all that God has brought to you, and all that God has kept from you. His ways are the best ways. Three couple things. Stay connected with us Wednesday nights, 7 o'clock, Sunday morning, 10:30. We have online Sunday school. Check it out. Stay faithful in your giving and your serving and the way that you guys are just loving us. That's awesome. Stay rooted with each other. Listen, everybody has a family or two that you can pick up the phone or Zoom or something, connect with, and let's maintain each other. Let's care for each other through this season. And as always, I think we're in a season that a lot of things could change very shortly. And so please stay connected to our All Church email and our Facebook, First Assembly Alexandria. And if we have any changes that are passed down and that affect us meeting or how we can meet or the way we need to go about meeting, we're going to make sure we get that information out to you. And again, lastly, a couple of things to give in. One, Christmas tree. We've committed to helping families, needy families, with their Christmas, and you can give to that. DC Shelter, you can give to that. Just write Christmas Outreach in the memo if you give online or in person, and we're going to help make somebody's Christmas better. First Assembly, I love you, I bless you, and I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving.